the session with folks.
Okay, so I don't want to waste time at all. For me, I'm always in a position where I want to be able to bring groups of people together and be able to share, lessons learned, share experiences, share ideas, because the only way for us to be able to move forward in housing is to make sure that, we're just being creative. There's a lot of needs, a lot of issues, but the mission for everyone is to have affordable, safe, healthy housing, right? And so some places are getting it right because of years of working towards that goal. And so this is an opportunity to be able to hear from Toronto. I don't, not even Toronto Public Housing, right? But but to be able to hear from folks on the ground in Canada that are doing some great work around healthy housing in the public housing world. So with that, Lorianne, take it away. And for those that don't know, I think everybody else knows from the last meeting, the amazing work that you do and the work that you did in New York City with Common Ground, now breaking ground in Community Solutions in Roseanne. So Lorianne, take it away.
Well, thank you. I'm over the moon to connect my two worlds, my two communities, and actually my two countries. I became a citizen of Canada a month ago, yay! And my journey has always been one of really learning with the communities that I've been honored to serve, and so the opportunity to create an exchange between Brownsville, where my heart and soul started before I moved to Toronto in the 2004 and 10 era, back when you were working for the Brownsville Partnership, to now. I'm just so excited. There is just so much work to do and so much knowledge and strength in our two communities that I'm just really grateful to have facilitated this exchange. And I'm going to hand the stick over quickly to Torian Lewis, who will just say a word or two about the Brownsville Partnership and the Beanin, and then we will welcome the Toronto folks to share about Lawrence Heights.
Thank you, Lori. My name is Torian Lewis. I'm the Community Engagement Specialist for the Brownsville Partnership. I'm also the leader for the Brownsville Neighborhood Empowerment Network. As most of you know who are on the call who are from Brownsville or from Brooklyn, but for those who aren't, the Brownsville Partnership is an organization that harnesses the best of the knowledge of residents, stakeholders, government agencies to create community change. And I will turn it over to Mr. Bowman.
Hello, you're turning it over to me.
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay, you'd like to, I'm Reginald Bowman. I'm the, in Brooklyn and in the New York City Housing Authority, there are 9 districts that represent the people that live in public housing. And for Brownsville in particular, the 18 developments, I'm the chairman of the council that represents the public housing in Brownsville, Brooklyn, and I'm also the senior member of the citywide council of presidents that represent the entire resident population in the NYCHA portfolio. And I'm glad to be part of the discussion.
Great, thank you, welcome. I'm wondering, just being sensitive to time and people have evenings, if folks want to use the chat to say hello and introduce themselves, and maybe we'll welcome our guests from Toronto and start the presentation. And if you have any, there'll be lots of time for questions. We really want folks to be asked as many questions, as difficult questions as they can. You will have time to do that live, or you can also do it in the chat. So with that, welcome. It's really a thrill for me to welcome Andrew, Carmen, and Vanessa today. Over to you guys.
Hi, all. My name's Carmen Smith, and I had the pleasure of working in Lawrence Heights for about 8 years. I want to say that when Lorianne contacted me and asked if we'd be interested in sharing our stories with the Brownsville folks, I was so excited. While I was working in Lawrence Heights, we had some of the Brownsville people come to Lawrence Heights. They did a bit of a visit. I think maybe Counselor was there. So we've met, and you met a few of our community leaders as well, and you saw some of the work that we were doing. And then I also was really honored to have the opportunity to visit Brownsville as well. We came back there just to see. So I did have a community tour. I met some of your incredible community leaders. And we saw some of the work that you're doing. So I'm really, really excited to have the opportunity to come back now to all of you and to just share some of the work that we did. And I hope that you'll find it interesting, informative, and maybe it'll spark a few thoughts and ways of doing things. And I just want to say also, we are not here as any experts. We're here to share our stories of the journey that we went through together. We learned it as we got together as a group and started doing the work. So that's kind of where we're at in this story. So we had a lot of fun. We grew close together, and we're happy that someone's interested in hearing about our work. So I'm going to turn it over to Vanessa. We have a bit of a presentation, and then really we just want to open it up to talk with you guys. So.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Vanessa Lorsano. To start us off, I'm just going to go over the agenda. So if you can just flip over to the next slide. Awesome. So we'll just do a quick intro. Thank you, Carmen, for getting us started. You'll also have an opportunity to learn about Lawrence Heights, what we did in regards to our community engagement strategy, what worked, what we learned, and what would we change. And then we'll leave Q&A and discussion for the end. We can move on to the next slides where we can kind of, go through. You all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome.
Yes,
I do want to
hear you.
Okay, perfect. I just want to apologize in advance. For some strange reason, whenever I use my TCHC work laptop, sometimes it mutes me automatically. So I do apologize in advance. Just let me know when I'm muted, okay? So once again, my name is Vanessa Lorsano. I've worked in the Lawrence Heights community for about 6 years now. I'm also.
You're muted. You are muted.
Babes. You're muted.
Vanessa.
Did it mute me?
Yes, it muted
Oh,
you.
I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm gonna try to I'm gonna pay attention to it so it doesn't happen again. I do apologize.
It muted you for 30 seconds.
Oh boy, so what was the last thing you heard?
Start over.
Your name.
Okay, so I'm gonna be very quick so it doesn't cut me out. So just quickly, I also grew up in Lawrence Heights and I had the pleasure of working with Carmen Smith, and a lot of the work I did is involving community engagement. So engaging tenants through the revitalization process and ensuring that they're well aware of the changes and the transitions that are happening. So I'm here. Thank you so much for having me, and I'll pass the mic to Andrew.
Hey, what's up, Brownsville? So quickly, my name is Andrew Cox, better known as Jada Man in the city of Toronto. Our story, man, what can I say? to know that we're here today presenting to you, it's just, we would have never thought this. Um, and as far as how I'm connected to this project, just like Vanessa, Lawrence Heights is a community that I grew up in. And I seen every facet of Lawrence Heights. Cause I think it's similar to Brownsville as far as some of the things that it experiences. And I've been on both ends of the totem pole as far as being out there on the block, and then, you know, looking for change, looking to do something more impactful with my life, and then finding it, and ultimately this process changing my life. And I always tell Carmen that she's one of the key people that helped to, you know, turn me into this huge success story in my city for many to take heed to, and just you know, follow, for a lack of a better word. So we thank you.
All right, let's get into it. Can we go on the next slide? Okay, so we're going to start off with a bit of a boring bit. We're going to tell you a little bit about the community and the housing. So Lawrence Heights is a community that's 100% social housing. There's about 3,500 to 4,000 tenants. It's all rent geared to income housing units. It's a huge land area. It's 100 acres. Well, that's huge for us. It might not be huge for Brownsville. There's a large number of family houses. So 3 or more bedrooms, detached family homes with big yards. So lots of open space, lots of green space. There's not a lot of tall buildings in Lawrence Heights, and that's because very close to the community, there's an airport. So when they built Lawrence Heights in the beginning, they had to pay attention to sort of height restrictions. So it's a community that's spread out rather than tall. The other, I think, defining feature of Lawrence Heights is when they built the community, for some reason, someone thought it would be a good idea to build a fence around the community. So it's really segregated and separated from the community that surrounds it. I think there's like 1 or 2 entrances to get in and out. And we'll talk a little bit about that fence and what that meant, and sort of the impact and how it kind of became symbolic in our journey of thinking about community change. There's very few community facilities inside the community. It's mostly all housing. There's one community center that's hugely overused, and it's badly in need of upgrading. And there's a community health center. And those really are the 2 hearts of the community in terms of gathering spaces and places where people go. And then the other thing is there's an expressway, a freeway that cuts the community in half. So, and it's an expressway. And so that, you know, became a defining issue for how the community was able to come together and how they were kind of separated in a way. So on the one side, we had no facilities, and on the other side, we had the health center and the community center, and that became affectionately known in the community as the Canada or US side, because the Canada side had the health center, and so that's how it was known in the community. And we'll go to the next slide.
All right, so just to add to what Carmen was mentioning, so we currently have about 3,500 to 4,000 tenants. Average length of tenancy is 8 years.
And to speak to that, so as you can see with the 8 years average length of tenancy, Lawrence Heights is a community that people don't want to leave. So historically, we have a lot of land. It's felt like family. It's felt like home for many. And usually if they're leaving, it's because, you know, they're overhoused. They need to, you know, children have grown and moved out and have their own families and that sort of thing. But we have a good amount of tenants. And with the 8 years tenancy, it's largely due to people needing to downgrade or, you know, change the composition of the units. But it's a community that people don't seldomly leave.
And to add to that, the majority of the populations are women. So that makes up about 62%.
Yeah, and if I could add with the women piece, women in Lawrence Heights play an integral part of um, pretty much every facet of life in the community. I mean, as women always do, right? But it's specifically in Lawrence Heights, with when it comes to the leadership building, with stepping up to the plate, with just ensuring that the community is together and is held. You'll see a lot of, we have some males that are strong and step forward, but you'll see a heavy female presence in those positions.
And we also have a large percentage of single parents household and youth in the community. So the percentage is about 50% and under 16 and 63% under 26.
Yeah, I think those demographics speak for itself. So you can go to the next one.
Yeah, and the average household income, just an FYI, is 14,000. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so with the average household income, so 14,000, that's Canadian. So American, I'm not sure that works out to conversion wise. Maybe 11,000 or something like that. But
It's not a lot of money.
It's not a lot, but the thing is, and you can find it throughout the world. If you're not told you are impoverished or living in poverty, there's a 80-90% chance you don't know, right? If it's around you. But so growing up, you didn't know. You had what you needed, and you got through, and love and togetherness and the spirit of the community overcame all.
Okay, so in terms of the community itself, socially, how the community makeup is, so the neighborhood ranked in the city ranking system, one of 13 priority neighborhoods in the city of Toronto. So they designated neighborhood priority ranking for a combination of factors. So there was low income in the community combined with lack of services and facilities, and the community would also have to be facing significant social and economic challenges. So Lawrence Heights had that designation, and that really was for the city to consider how they would prioritize investment as things move forward. The community faced for years and years, still ongoing serious community safety issues. So things like gun violence, domestic violence, things like that, ongoing issues. Again, the fence, I talked about it earlier, symbolic and actually a real barrier in the sense that the community had a sense of being separated from not just the community around them, but the city in general.
Yeah, if I can add to that, Carmen.
Yeah.
So with the fence, so there's literally a fence around the entire community, and at some point, and so you got a fence around the community, and then there's an expressway. I'm trying to figure out what you may call it in America, but maybe it's called an expressway, highway expressway, where cars can drive through. There's an expressway in the middle of the community. And growing up, the fence that was there, you could see the fence from the expressway, and you could see kids, just looking through the fence, and, people driving by looking up like, oh my goodness, like, look at those kids. And at some point they changed the fence with like a brick wall. So there's a brick wall going all the way, around the community. So you did feel, so there was a sense of you coming, leaving the community, coming inside the community, saying, you know what, why doesn't, the city want our kids or anybody to have a view of, what's going on in our communities? And then when you're inside the community, it literally you felt this sense of entrapment, right? Not only because of the fences, because of the, the one way or the two ways in and two ways out. It felt enclosed and entrapped, and you were in this melting pot. So and that was a big part of our the conversations that we held when we were redesigning the community through revitalization. So I just wanted to point that out. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, okay, no, that's good. Um, Again, so I talked about the lack of community facilities and agencies in the community. There's a network of agencies that are working in the area, but there was a real strong perception that the agency network were not working in the community for the community. And you'll see, we'll talk a little bit about how that changed as we move forward. So yes, challenges, incredible assets. I'm sure like Brownsville community as well. Incredible music and arts, talent, athletics. Lawrence Heights is known for basketball stars. Some big leaders in that community, cultural leaders as well, spoken word artists, incredible community history and legacy there. And a very, very, very strong sense of community and solidarity and community cohesion. And so, and that really became prominent for us when we came into the community and said, we want to talk to you about revitalization and building new housing. So that sense of community cohesion and not wanting to move away and be away or disrupt their networks became a key issue that we had to really seriously think about when we were doing this process. Unbelievable grassroots community leadership. I can see that in the Brownsville community as well. So some common ground there, no question about that. But that is really what made our process work. That
Yeah,
was the foundation of
yeah.
where we.
Sorry,
That's okay.
yeah, I know you're transitioning there. So if I could
Yeah.
speak to that last point about grassroots community leadership engaged and empowered. So as far as us being, so Lawrence Heights being, there was a community before us in Toronto. Well, there was maybe two, but there, I'm talking in regards to size, a community name called Regent Park that went through a similar process. And when we started, they were maybe midway or a quarter way through the process. But in order for something like this to work, so at Toronto Community Housing, Lawrence Heights has the largest acred what you would call public housing community in the city. So for it to work and for us to sort of be one of the trendsetters in how we do the work, this was a key component as far as the community ultimately having strong grassroots community leadership. So when Carmen came in and she made a request, or she let folks know who she was looking for, what she was looking for, because some things were already sown in the ground and maybe in destiny. We came together as a strong unit. Not all communities have that, and we realize it. But through the process, we created some frameworks that allow for communities to sort of get these leaders or get these potential leaders ready and get them together so that they're strong and they can move forward. So I said that was going for us, and through it, we created a lot of best practices. So that was key.
Okay, next slide. Sorry, next one. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about how we built an community animator team, community leadership team, and sort of how we approach the work. So for Toronto Community Housing, the key goals that the public housing company had was they wanted to replace social housing that was aging, and in the process, create mixed communities. And so we thought, all right, we need a little bit of a broader focus. In Lawrence Heights, we really wanted to focus on, let's build tenant leadership and capacity. So let's build leadership to be fully involved in the process. We also wanted tenants to be involved in the actual planning process. So developing the vision, developing the sort of what the community would look like, what the buildings would be like. All of that was important part of the process. And of course, a huge one is to improve social and economic opportunities for people living in the housing, because revitalization is way more than bricks and mortar. It's about investing in a community for its future. You can build new buildings, and you will still have issues unless you really think about revitalizing a community, social and economically as well. So we really took that to heart. And that was really a key focus of how we approached.
I'm ready. I'm downstairs.
Sorry?
It's only 6 o'clock. Okay, I'm leaving now. Okay. Bye.
Okay. Okay, so in terms of our framework, there really was two key ways that we approached it. The first was, if we were going to talk about engaging the community, we wanted to do it in the context of developing community development and community building. So for us, it meant that we could have meetings to talk to people about what might happen and to ask for their input. But we decided we were going to take it a step further, that we were all going to work on things in the community that may not have been necessarily directly related to revitalization planning. But if there were things like a park that was happening, people would get involved in that. People would get involved in community gardening. We built a stage together, to an outdoor stage to have people come together. So things that would be community building, but maybe not necessarily connected to engaging the community on, social housing rebuild, but the broader things that were happening. And people really got on board with that. And the other piece of it was to really engage and empower residents to be meaningfully involved. And when I say meaningfully involved, I mean give people a role. If we're going to work together collaboratively, we can't ask people to do that on their own time as volunteers, because we're getting paid and we're partners in the process. So, we need to pay people for their time. We need to recognize that community lived experience and knowledge is valuable and important in the process, and we need to recognize that. So, let's think about, if we're going to meet at dinner time, we'll provide people with a meal. If we're going to ask people to travel, let's provide them with the transportation means to get there. And if people, if English is not their first language, let's make sure that we have an interpreter or translators there so they can understand and participate fully. So, and not, we wanted to take it farther. So let's not just have someone be a member of a committee. Why couldn't they be a chair of a committee? Why couldn't they be a fully engaged in being someone who helped us select who our developer was for the community? We pushed and advocated all through the process to really give meaningful roles, and it really made a difference, I think. So we'll talk a bit about that. Okay, next slide. Okay, we wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of zero displacement. This was a key issue that was raised by community members when we first came in and started talking about revitalization. People said to us, this community means everything to me. I don't want to move. I don't want my family to move. We want to stay here. We knew shortly after starting a process that there was no way that we were going to have the community work with us unless there was a commitment that people could stay in the community during construction, during the transition phase. That's a photo of one of the new buildings, by the way. So Toronto Housing went back and had to do some pretty careful analysis about, could this work or not? How could this work if you're talking about a massive redevelopment? And they did it. And they did it through a series of actions. So the first is they decided that the process would happen in very small phases. So just a little piece of the community at a time. And so in that area, they would withhold any vacant units if people transferred or if they moved or if, whatever reasons people move. And then they would withhold units, which was an issue because it meant that Toronto Housing wouldn't receive the rental income and there would be a vacant unit and people are on the waiting list for housing, quite frankly. So that was an issue that they had to grapple with. But you know, there was consensus that it was an important enough step in the process, and that if we were going to truly work with the community, we need to listen to what was important to them. And that was a key thing. And so the CEO went to the community, and, you know, we had a community meeting. And at the time she said, you won't have to move out of the community when it's your turn for your construction to happen in your area. So once we achieved that, I think there was almost a collective sigh of relief in the neighborhood, and we could move forward with planning and that. So that was really important. I'm not sure if that's an issue in Brownsville, or, but I wanted to raise that up for discussion. So, all right, next slide. Yeah, so I'll just open this, and I'm going to turn it over to Andrew and Vanessa. Their Toronto Community Housing had, in the first revitalization process, undertaken a model of peer engagement called a community animator team. And we got on board to do that in Lawrence Heights as well. So when I came to work in the community, you know, I came from a political job. I worked at the mayor's office as a policy advisor for 5 years. One of my files was Toronto Community Housing, and I got to hear about the work that people were doing in these communities. And I got very excited, and I, down the road, had the opportunity to come to Lawrence Heights and do this. I have to say, it was a real eye-opening experience for me. It was a real reality check. I you know, got into the community, and I did, you know, I struggled a bit, to be upfront, and I thought, all right, we're going to get an animator team, we're going to build it together, and we're going to do it together. So that's how we started. We started from the ground up. We went out and said, all right, we're going to work with a team of community animators. Who are they? And, you know, what kind of people did we want to build on our team? The number one thing was we wanted to connect with people who are passionate about their community, who were community builders, and people that would embrace change. That's important, right? We wanted to acknowledge the history and tradition in the community of, you know, leadership. So we looked for people who had a history of community activism. Important. We wanted also to represent areas of the community, gender, age, the different geographic areas of the community, both sides of the bridge. 60% youth. We had to make a big investment into bringing youth on our team. We looked for people who are influencers in the community, people who others would listen to, and people who could connect, people who could inspire, people who could go out into the community and have a conversation. Let's talk about community change. What does it mean to you? What you know, what are you interested in seeing as we move forward? And we also, and this is a key one that you know, Andrew can talk a bit about. We look for people also who had the potential for success. So I'll give an example of that. A youth turned up for an animator interview, and he was amazing. He was 14 years old, but I could tell this guy really had a spark, and he had a passion for his neighborhood and community. And so I had to sit back and think about it. And I went to my team and said, you know, this guy came, and he's 14 years old, and I don't know, can we take a 14-year-old person on to do this work? I don't know. And I struggled with it. And one of my coworkers said, just give him a chance. Just try it. He's interested. He's, you know, he's passionate. He cares. Let's try it. So we did. We gave him a chance. And so, you know, fast forward 8 years ahead. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I'm just seeing a note, I'm muted. So 8 years ahead, and I raise this only because I got a text message about 2 weeks ago from someone way on the other end of the city. And she said, oh, I just want to let you know I'm working with a youth who's from Lawrence Heights. And he's a youth worker now. And he's, you know, she told me he was doing all these things. And she said, he said someone gave him a chance, and he worked on this incredible team of community animators and leaders, and it inspired him to keep going and make change in other areas of the city. So I don't know, I remember that, and it really touches me, because sometimes you got to give people a chance in this work, right? And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what it
So
is.
no, thanks for that, Carm.
It's not all about skills and who's got the best resume. It's got who's got the heart for the community, and giving people a chance sometimes.
Exactly. If I can add to that, can you hear me? Can you hear me
Yeah.
all right? Okay, so if I can add to that, I think you said it all pretty much, but the thing that stands out with the animators and with having animators, so a group of, it's key to ensure that they're from the soil, right? So they're from the community, and have a lay of the land, understand the community. People can connect with them, and people resonate with their energy, their vibe, right? And I think, Carmen, you did a great job with selecting, figuring out who was who, and putting the team together. And ultimately, with animators and with any position, especially in community development, you're gonna have turnover, right? Some people, can withstand 6 months. Some people can withstand a year, but you're gonna have turnover. The other great piece with that is that internally, we, for times of turnover internally, we would recommend other people, because there may be somebody else on the horizon, right? As far as somebody that's coming up and they're showing great leadership and great potential for success, and we make those recommendations and bring them on board to keep the wheel going, right? So another big piece with that is that incubator. It's funny. It's almost like a
Incubators.
I know. Okay, so let's not say incubators. Okay, so the model that we had, as Carmen alluded to, everybody from that first cohort, or from that group that initially started the revitalization process, are doing, or is doing, big things in the city. We got people that are in the legal force, in the legal sector. We got managers out of it. We have people that are still in community, running their own businesses. It's something about putting like-minded people and energy together that produces greatness. And I just want to keep that on the template of everybody's mind.
Okay. Next slide. I think we missed one. Sorry. Can we go back one? That's it. Okay. We have I think about 10 or 15 minutes, 10 minutes left for this, and then we'll do some questions. So take it away, Andrew.
Okay, so we could just run through this piece here. So just some of the things that we did as community animators. As you can see, the first point: traditional ways of engaging community, like meetings, planning workshops, doing surveys. But one thing we'd like you to know that with the animators were at the center of every task that every plan that we rolled out. The animator's voice was at the center of it, and that's critical for successful engagement. I'm sure you all know that already. We had a lot of fun. Too. Lots of fun. Barbecues, talent shows, back to school events. We had the community rocking. Weekly in the summers, every week. As Carmen mentioned, we built an outdoor stage, and it was also a place where we connected a lot of the rest of the city for our events and talent shows. I invited folks from all over the city. I mean, of course, we got to watch that, right? Because for different elements. But at that time, it helped to bring people together, and some of those people that were connected and performing are off doing big things, touring together, and are close friends to this day. We had movie nights. We had a pizza oven outside. Like, we just embody everything creative that we can think of, that people asked for, that was within our reach. We did it. I remember Carmen, when she got her budget, she's like, hey, I got this amount of money. What do we want to do? And I was like, what? I was like, all right, let's do this, this, and this, right? So that's kind of how we did it.
Yeah.
And we also did some innovative stuff as far as documenting our neighborhood. So we did movies, little mini documentaries with music projects alongside of it. We got them entered into festivals that were shown around the city, potentially around the country, and some other big things and things that I'm most proud for is a part of the process is getting each phase approved at our city hall, at our council. And so getting our communities and our tenants ready, our residents ready to make deputations. Some didn't know what that was. They seen it on TV, but just getting them in the mind state of, being able to have your voice heard right in front of a council person, somebody at that level, a city official, was just things that people have never heard of before. So even I made a quote in one of the articles in the newspaper where I said, walking down that first time to City Hall or to one of our councils to make deputations made me feel like that moment in Malcolm X, that moment when he came out of jail and they asked everybody to leave and he turned, and he said, let's go. Everybody, it felt like that moment, all the synergy that was connected, and we were victorious every step of the way. A lot of hard work, but we were victorious in getting it pushed through. And as Carmen mentioned before, a great part to get the community at even the developing stage with the brick and mortar, outside of helping with the designs, is getting a panel together with that is comprised of residents and maybe, some staff and that sort of thing. But to be able to pick out, to interview the developers and, they have a voice in actually choosing, who made the best presentation based on whatever metrics, and and come in and do the work in your community. So we did that as well. And ultimately we had some great times and there was some down times, right? Tragedies, but also just moments of when you're building something from the ground up, right? Sometimes there's infighting, sometimes people don't see eye to eye, but we stuck through it and we won awards. And at the end of the day, it was all worth it because we're here today.
Okay, next slide. And I just a couple points here is that we really work to be inclusive, to be as inclusive as possible, to make sure that it wasn't just the loudest voices that were playing leadership roles, it was the quiet leaders as well. And those people, it's really important to include their perspectives as well. I talked about addressing barriers, making sure people had every opportunity to participate. And the other thing is, just being prepared to listen. So if you're thinking about, collaborative leadership, working together, you have to be prepared to listen. That can be challenging. You've got parameters in your, you've got things that you can do and you can't. Just the piece about being transparent. You've got to be transparent if you're gonna work together in this way with tenant leadership. Okay, next slide.
All right, so this is me in regards to the social and economic development. So as what Andrew was mentioning earlier in regards to beyond bricks and mortars, with the revitalization project, the idea is to, yes, change the community physically, but also trying to improve the lives of the tenants living in the community, right? There's people living there. So how do we ensure that we're still highlighting the culture, the heritage of the community that's not being forgotten? How do we connect tenants to meaningful employment opportunities and sustainable opportunities so that they can get connected to resources when they come up, like home ownership program, connecting them to scholarship program. To date, we were able to award 150 scholarships. Since revitalization started, we were able to.
You're muted.
You're muted again.
Vanessa, you went on mute.
Muted.
Again, I'm sorry. What was the last thing you heard?
Scholarships.
Okay, scholarships. So to date, we had awarded about 150 scholarship since 2013. So that's 150 scholarship that we awarded to adults, you know, young people that are transitioning from high school to university or college. To date, we were able to also recruit young people and keep them engaged during the summer. We've hired about 71 youth. So yes, it's great. We're changing all the physical, but it's also keeping in mind about the social piece and keeping tenants engaged throughout the process.
Okay. So we wanted to just take a few minutes and share our perspectives on things that we felt worked well and things that we might think about if we had to go back and do it again. So I think the first thing we had talked about it is we really built a team of leaders. There was a real change and advancements for people who participated as on our community animator program. Andrew mentioned there's people now who are, you know, women who have their own businesses. They're doing cleaning. They have a contract with Toronto Community Housing to do when people move out of the units. They do the cleanup for that and the unit prep. Community leadership people have gone to school to do urban planning, social work, a whole range of different leadership. And as Andrew said, you know, people have really branched out from the community across the city, and that's really a big piece of this, I think, for us.
Yeah, and as far
Sorry.
as no, was that me? Is it my turn?
Yeah, no, we're still on the same slide. Sorry.
Yeah. So as far as
Okay.
changing, no, that part was good, Carmen. As far as changing the narrative, um, as far as in regards to people not mattering and not having a voice, I think one of the key successes of this project was that. So let me go back just a little bit. There was with the onset of revitalization and the community, us going out in the community and people hearing that we were doing this, some of the old timers, and I'm saying folks that were there for at least 15, 20, 30 years, was just like, we heard this already. They always say they're going to tear this place down. It's always, when if you build something, they will come. Like at that point, I didn't realize how true that saying was until we started building it, and they started to see real tangible progress. They started to see the progress. And as with each quarter that passed, every 3 months, we started to see it grow. We started to see people, the mindset change, and the community members actually, started to realize, hey, this is happening. We do have a voice. Let's get on board, right? So that was great for the empowerment piece.
And it, building that leadership throughout the process and having people to really take leadership. In the end of the day, the community members are who made this planning approvals happen. When we went to the council to look for approvals for the zoning changes, it was the people from the community that went down to City Hall that spoke out, that said, I would like to live in a neighborhood like the people who live beside us outside the fence, and I would like to have the opportunity to own my own home if I live in my community. And so, their voices were very strong, and every step of the political process for the approvals, it was residents who made the difference, and they really helped move the process forward. And move the process forward, not just getting approvals, but to have a plan that truly represented what the people in the community, what their priorities were. So that was really important.
Yeah, and I think we touched on some of the ways we engage the youth. I mentioned a lot of the engaged activities and strategies we came up with as far as just bringing the community together. strengthening community partnerships. There was a lot of partnerships that got strengthened, with whether it was grassroots groups coming together. So neighboring communities, we do have a community right around the corner from Lawrence Heights, and the name of the community is Neptune. It's part of the larger Lawrence Heights community, but some folks have felt separated because it's actually maybe like a 3-minute drive, and this process brought leaders together from both communities, and even with some of our employment partners and other neighborhood community partners, like local underground grassroots partners that had maybe small funding to do some work in some of the communities. It brought everybody together to do the work in a harmonious way, and just provide opportunities to everybody that was involved.
Okay. Next slide. So these were some of the reflections that we shared as we were talking about our presentation. So I think things that we learned throughout the process: community burnout is real. We do a lot of work in the community. We ask a lot of people. There's, some people have been doing the same work for years and years, and you want to have a balance, and you want to honor that history and the work that people have put into their building their neighborhoods for years. And at the same time, you want to have a balance of bringing new people on board. So, just as you go through, you need to do your temperature checks. You need to check in and see how people are doing. Because there's nothing worse than going out and, trying to do some community engagement with people that really have, they've have fatigue over this stuff. So always reflecting on your process, how you're working, and having those open conversations with your leaders to do check-ins.
And to add, it's important to also do consistent needs assessments. The community is constantly changing. People will move in, people will move out. So the needs will change, right? So you want to make sure that whatever the priority was 5 years ago, if it's still relevant. So it's important to be up to date as much as possible in order so that you can better support your tenants or residents of the community.
And just talk a little bit about community safety. So when we started talking about revitalization, improving community safety was a key issue that people in the neighborhood said revitalization could help. Revitalization would, had the potential to bring improved community safety. And as part of this process, council asked us to have a community policing plan to support the physical plan, and we did that. We did that together. I have to say it was kind of difficult to bring that sector on board, to getting them to participate in the process. And just thinking about the years since we started until now, there's continuing safety issues. Safety is way beyond the bricks and mortar of a building. It's important that these are complex issues. They need ongoing commitment. They need ongoing strategies. They need everyone to work together to make positive progress in that. So always keeping that on the burner, and how that is worked on in the community is really important. One of the things that we did when we started was through the agency network finally came together after about a year of us being in Lawrence Heights. So they decided, okay, we better get on board here and start doing some work because change is happening, right? So the network set up a community safety subcommittee of the organization group, chaired by residents, very effective, does incredible work in the community on community healing circles, all kinds of stuff like that. So that's a piece that needs to be integrated, I think, from the beginning, at least from our experience, just to think about that. And then I think another important piece is when we started, our focus was really on our residents in the community. And our engagement strategy centered on that. And we talked about, Andrew talked about there being a fence around the community. And I think, you know, if I think about it now, a learning for us was it would have been helpful in terms of thinking the bigger picture and an integrated process to reach out more and connect with people who are living in the surrounding communities. Not that that would not have been a challenge, because it would have been, but just, you know, taking some extra strategies to develop those relationships, I think would have been helpful for as the process moved forward.
Okay, thanks, Carm. I just want to touch on the second last point, which says to start early to prepare tenants for employment and home ownership. So where we're going with that is, we know with these development opportunities, and we recommended and suggested that, you know, a part of the package is that there's a commitment from the developers to give back to the community in a social social way, which also includes employment. So we know a lot of opportunities come up as far as working with the new businesses that are coming in, but you know, with the demolition, it creates a whole bunch of work, and with new units, there's a potential for home ownership. My big thing was always about affordable home ownership. We could have done it a little better. And when I say that, let's go back to employment. Looking back in hindsight, we should have sort of started maybe 2 years prior to any groundbreaking, as far as, or even more years, the more the better, the more the better, as far as getting people ready, trying to understand, hey, what kind of position, what kind of job? Well, here's a list of jobs that could come out of this. And we did get that. We went to Regent Park to find out. As I mentioned, Regent Park was another community that started before us. We found out what kind of jobs could come out of this, you know, a potential development like this. We got that, get a list of potential positions, even working with the developer to figure that out, and then get the community ready, assess the skill sets, where people at, and then bring in the partners and the resources to get them there so that when the opportunity comes, they're prepared. Same thing with home ownership, right? We know it's a process, right? I've just closed on a few properties, and I had no idea. I always heard that people just lose their head every time they're closing mortgages, 9 times out of 10. And I realized it's the preparedness, right? Not your debt to credit rate, your debt to income ratio, your credit score. All these things matter, and it takes time to get you there, especially if you don't have a history of, you know, having a successful, you know, credit history. So to do things differently in that area, we would have taken some more time and got people prepared to fulfill those positions that were there for them.
Yeah, at the end of the day, not as many people were able to access the grants for home ownerships that we had envisioned would happen. So, and that was, you know, as Andrew mentioned, partly a question of starting early to talk about the process of home ownership and what that means and that kind of thing. So, yeah. And I think the last point we wanted to reflect on was the need to, you know, if you're working with developer partners, make sure you have really clear and transparent language and agreements on, you know, contributions and stuff like that. So here's an example. We negotiated a financial contribution from a developer partner that they would invest into the community. And then you get down the road and you find that they have one understanding of that and you have a different understanding. So that's really an administrative thing, but it's also something that, you know, speaks loudly to community members as well. So that's an ongoing issue, and, you know, important to just make sure you've got really clear understanding of what the commitments are and what the contributions are. So So those are, that pretty much wraps up, I think. That's our last slide? Yeah. So that's
Yep.
sharing a bit of our experiences. We wanted to share with you a few more voices from our team. This was a video that was done through an organization called Canadian Urban Institute. And so they have every year awards for planning and community building. And they have an award called Local Heroes that they give every year. And that's to people from communities who are recognized for the community building efforts. And our team was honored to receive this award. It was a few years ago now. And this is a video that they took, a promotional video they took for it. So. Is the sound on?
I can hear you.
I don't think the video sound is on.
Does the video have audio?
It does.
It's not coming through.
I'll give it another whirl. Maybe while
Did
we're,
we just lose the video?
Yeah, may
I
not be
think
working.
so. Donna's taking a look at it. But maybe while, thank you, Donna, for troubleshooting. Can open it up for questions, and Counselor, if you have any thoughts about what resonates with Brownsville, but what might be different, that would be great to start off with.
I'm just wanting to open it up to the residents, but I'll just blow through my notes real quick. Of course, Carmen, when you first opened up, you said, well, we're not experts. And I always say that, we all are experts. This is our home, and, everyone is an expert on what should happen in their communities and stuff. And so, but what was interesting, and I think this is why clearly we visited Lawrence Heights, is because of the 4,000 units. And we were looking at the time, the fact that just between Brownsville and Tilden and Cefalo and Van Dyke, we have like the same amount of units. Just like within, if you just group up like certain developments, like maybe 4 developments here, or take away, there's a way to make it work within that 4-block radius with our super blocks, which made me think about the fact that you have that gated piece in front of Lawrence Heights, and it made me think about how our developments are on these super blocks. And people tend to not want to go into Brownsville, not want to go into the public housing developments, and it's that same kind of mindset. But what I did pull out was questions related to the actual process itself, because you did say that there's some like outreach fatigue, right? Engagement fatigue. And so in Brownsville, it's been years. Like, residents know what, they are experts and they know what should happen. They have a vision for the community. There are plans, right? The issue is just that, how do we get from this vision to making it happen? And so I was just interested in hearing, how did you actually provide not just input, but be a partner in the development itself? And if the Toronto Community Housing provided resources and funding to assist with developing a vision plan and submitting that as part of the ideas itself. And then if you can speak a little more to not just going to meetings, but participating in the developer selection during the proposal process, just like really kind of give us a sense of what that looked like.
Yep.
Because that's a big piece of it and a key piece of it, to be part of not just the selection, but the ideas around even what the proposal should look like before the developers even submit their proposals. Like the residents
Okay.
should be part of that whole conversation. Um, and then that zero displacement, when we just the word displacement just sets a whole explosion because we've gone through a nitrogen development where families were told, if you just move to this particular development for this particular time, you'll be able to move back to your home, once it's renovated.
Oh,
And those developments actually came down, and that never happened, right? And so but when we look at other communities where they build and then move the families into those new units, that makes sense. But we don't do that here in New York. They'll build a building in the middle of a nitrogen development and it's for somebody else. So just that just kind of jumped out at me. But really around being a meaningful partner, and just so those are my questions, but I don't want you to answer them yet. I want to hear from the residents because this is about the residents.
me. Anybody?
Hey, Shalavia. Hey, Miss
Hi.
Kirsten.
It's so um all of your questions are valid, and I have the same questions for them, and I have one that's even deeper. So here in New York, the idea is that we become resident management corporations. So not only are we looking to create economic opportunities for the residents in and around the communities, but for the resident leadership itself. We want to manage our situation, not just play participation. The law says that we can manage this property if we're trained appropriately, or if we have the right team in place, that we can be the business that is the property management. So I'm interested in that aspect of it.
Okay, we have slightly different model here. That would be a step farther in the process that we have not gotten that far in our process. So I mean, there would definitely be some learnings there for us as well in terms of this. I don't know if Lorianne, you want to add anything, or Vanessa, or, but that, we're not that far down the road yet.
Yeah, yeah, I would say that's amazing though. That as you said, the law says that the residents can manage the the property and that sort of thing if you're adequately trained. So as Carmen said, we're not there. I don't know if we have that system in place here, so it's hard to speak to that. But yeah, it's just hard to speak to. I'm drawing from places I don't even know where to go with that.
So Carmen, I just want to ask a question. So would that be similar to co-op? Would that model be similar to that?
Yeah,
This is Lorianne. I'll dive in. So it is.
Yeah.
It has elements of that, but it really it really is about public housing. And just as you guys participated in the developer selection, and there was sort of a resident-based part of the development process, just imagine if that kind of robust management and oversight was also situated with residents. There's a couple of examples in TCHC, Carmen, like hydro, where residents are managing certain aspects. They might manage might manage the landscaping or their sort of employment links, but this is a much more fulsome sort of resident say and oversight in in the actual physical property management. So,
Yeah.
And it's a potential direction. I conscious of time, and we'll still have time for questions, but the video is up, so maybe we should just go for that and see if it's we can hear some of the other Lawrence Heights resident voices through the video. Donna?
I'm 21 years old. I've lived in the Lawrence Heights community my whole life. I got an opportunity to work with TCHC when I was 18. And that was something that really changed my life around. Us as animators, we're like the liaison. We go to all the residents and we're the ones that inform them about community forums, different meetings, events, different things that are here for them to gather information about the revitalization process.
I believe an animator is working for the community. An animator is that advocate, that voice that the community needs. It doesn't matter what language you speak, it doesn't matter where you came from. What matters is Lawrence Heights community. So when we come to the table, we have one voice.
I think it's important for me as a resident to be involved in the process just because it's something that's going to be affecting us directly. It's not going to be really affecting anybody else but us, the people who live here.
This revitalization process is very important to my community. It will take away a negative stigma that my community is known for. It's going to change the way that the community is built, which is kind of isolated and boxed in. But most of all is creating employment opportunities, business opportunities.
With this revitalization process in TCHC, we've really embraced that we're in this together and anything we could do to help each other out, that's what we're going to do.
The beginning was, I have no say, I have no voice, I am nothing. But right now is, I am something.
So inspiring. Maybe we'll, if there are other questions, and then I think maybe the Toronto team could also answer a couple of the questions that the counselor posed.
I have some questions.
Great. Go for it, Mr. Bowman.
Okay. As you may be aware, the New York City Housing Authority has several different projects going on simultaneously. However, a couple of years ago, in partnership with the Brownsville group and conducted by Ms. Pearson, we did a survey and put together a 3 to 5 year analysis and plan for CEFLO houses. With that being said, and we turned it over to our city council person. With that being said, as a premise, I wanted to ask some questions about your presentation that you just gave, which was very good. First question was, what is the governing structure of the Toronto Community Housing Corporation? Second question is, does the Toronto Community Housing Authority run Lawrence Heights? How are the developments funded? In this process, did you create contracts or benefits agreements? Do the residents have a resident council, or is it local, regional, or national? How are the public housing developments and those communities politically represented? And my last question is, what are your impressions of Brownsville public housing, and what of your best practices do you recommend to our resident leadership? I sent those questions in writing in the chat section. So
Okay. All right. I was frantically writing while you were talking, so you might have to jog my memory. Okay, so in terms of Toronto community housing, the governance model is it's run by a board of directors. On that board of directors, which is an arm's length agency of the city. So it's not, people are not directly employed by the city of Toronto. They're employed by a nonprofit organization called Toronto Community Housing. They have a board of directors. On that board of directors, there are 2 city council persons. There are 2 tenants of Toronto Community Housing, and then there are a range of people who bring different expertise to the board. So that board makes decisions, but that board also has to report in to the city of Toronto. Let me think. Resident.
So that board is subordinate to the city of Toronto.
Yes, and the board members are appointed by Toronto Council.
Okay.
Okay. And there's 2 tenants who are elected in a sort of a citywide election to the Toronto Community Housing Board of Directors. And
yeah, we're actually looking for new tenants to sit on the board now. So the last term is ending now.
So when that structure was created for resident representation, were you guys involved in creating that, or was that already in existence?
No, that preceded us. That preceded us by probably about 15 years, when the city decided it would create this arm's length company to manage its social housing, public housing. So that happened about
similar to what's happening in New York. Our chairperson is now proposing that some kind of trust be created to cut it off and create something different. So anyway, let's move on to the next question, because it's amazing how there's so many similarities.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so in terms of governance and resident councils, I think the Toronto Housing is in the midst of doing a transition now. They did have a system of geographically elected tenant councils who would be elected to represent the communities in specific areas of the community. And I think that system was in place for since the housing company was created, which is about 15 years. And I think they're currently going through a process of refreshing that model and doing some consultations with tenants about what they want to see in the model. So I don't, Andrew,
I could touch a little bit on that model. Yeah, I can touch a little bit on that model. So as far as tenant leadership within Toronto community housing communities, Carmen is right. We had a system that was told through some consultation. We were advised that, hey, we need to get with it. We need to up it just a little bit. So through about 2.5, 3 years of consultation, what we came up with is we're going with, so communities within the Toronto community housing can elect to have community representatives. So for every 250 units, in the past, in the old structure, you can have 1 person to represent the community for every 250 units, but now it's doubled, right? So that 1 is now turned into 2, but we've also introduced another model, which is a committee model. So your community had the autonomy to choose, hey, we want to run with a community representative or 2, or maybe 2 or 4 community representatives, or we can have a committee, a group of folks making leadership decisions and that sort of thing. So along with communities being able to select their models, all models are in place now. The next piece was for communities to create a community action plan. So basically a work plan for the community, right? So everything's in sync. We all know what we're doing in every community. All the residents and tenants have been involved in the process, and it runs for a term. So as long as we have the new model in place and community representation, the work plan will run for that 3-year term, and then every 3 years you renew the cycle. So that's where we're at with community leadership
Now, is
representation.
that plan just for Lawrence Heights, or is that for all of the public housing in Toronto?
Yeah, so it's straight throughout for Toronto community housing communities, for the communities that chose to go with it. So communities,
Okay.
there were some communities that didn't want. They said, "Nah, we're cool. We're good where we're at. We don't need any of that stuff there," and that's
Okay.
fine too. Yeah.
So my last question was, what is your impression of Brownsville public housing, and what of your best practices after you've seen what Brownsville is doing right now? What are some of the things you might recommend to us as some of your best practices and strategies?
I think there's a lot of similarities. The size of the community, the level of leadership that I see, that I saw when I was there, just in terms of how the community is laid out geographically. I think, having a community animator team, or some people call it community ambassadors, where you make some, very specific efforts on investing in a leadership group for the community is definitely a best practice that will really, I think, create legacy and help move your community building efforts ahead. No question about that. That's our experience. I would strongly say that's the best practice from our end. Let me think.
Carmen, can I jump in? Sorry, with my past Toronto Community Housing hat and my current engagement with Brownsville Partnership. And this relates to a question the councillor asked, which is, how was that done? Were developers paying for that? Did Toronto Community Housing provide resources for that? And the answer is actually yes. To Carmen's point that people, the community animators are providing a valuable service. They're actually paid. And so that's part of the negotiations with the developer. They have to fund that element of the community animation. And so it's not just that the developer is going to sort of fund new bricks and mortar or the community center, but there's an intentional resourcing and investment in the leadership. And the animators receive, they're actually employees of Toronto Community Housing. And maybe I'm misspeaking, and Andrew, Vanessa, and Carmen can keep me whole, but it is, it's not just investing in the leadership group, but it is investing with actual, financial and training and other resources.
No, that's good. Vanessa, did you want to speak to the animators as far as, because I just wanted to, so before, yes, Lori, during your time, animators were getting paid directly to Toronto Community Housing. But Carmen, just when we were ending our era, if you recall, some of the tenants, it was impacting their rent, and they had to file taxes. So we've kind of come up with some ways to now have a third party sort of just be the middle person for the so we get we get an RFP, request for proposal, from a third party that could manage that whole piece, administer that whole piece, and do the interviews and we'd be a part of it. And so we channel the funds there. So the funds will go to the third party, or they would charge us a fee for whatever the role that you're taking. The funds will go there, and then they'd pay out the animators. So just to help alleviate, remember, it's about alleviating and minimizing barriers, right? So if your income tax and your rent's going to go up because you're doing some community work now in your community, let's try to remove that and find another way to do it. So we did.
Maybe I'll
we have a similar process in place in New York. One other question. how would you suggest that we approach the authority with the concept of creating that type of a middle person in between them and the animators, as you guys call it, because the same thing happens in the New York City Housing Authority. When you, if they employ you, then it has an impact on your lease and your rent. And we're in the process of negotiating some things now with the MOU citywide. So how would you suggest we approach them with the concept of eliminating that segment where our work interferes with our recertification and rent guidelines?
Yeah, that's a tough one for us. I mean, I would just suggest you tell your stories. You document your experiences. Pull your stories together. Who's doing the MOU?
The MOU is actually being created by the Department of Housing, Urban and Development, the New York City Housing Authority, the Citywide Council of Presidents, which consists of representatives from all 9 districts in the public housing in New York, and other resident leadership are also involved in creating this MOU.
So in our situation, we had, I mean, what made it work for us is that we had strong advocates on the staff side who were able to present the case that, if we were really going to ask for full participation and tenants to be involved, we had to recognize that we had to make some accommodation there, right? So in other words, I guess what I'm saying is
You had to negotiate.
Yes, negotiation for sure, but having champions in your corner helps also. So you might want to, give some thought to, who can champion your points there.
When you say champions, you mean champions in the housing authority? Or champions,
I hear somebody laughing.
In the political level or the authority, or
I'd say both.
Oh, okay.
I'd say both.
Okay.
Sure.
I mean, some of these questions I'm asking are rhetorical, because there's a lot of similarities between what you guys are doing now and have accomplished, and some of the things that have happened I've been involved in this stuff in a lifespan. But right now, there's a lot of negotiations going on with the local resident associations at each individual development because of the new RAD program and other things. And so some of these tools that you're talking about are being applied and need to be applied by our residents. And I hope that when this process started taking place, I started hooking them up with the Brownsville Partnership so that they could get the type of community building and other negotiating skills that they needed while this transition is going on. So hopefully this process of what we're doing right now and communicating to the resident leadership will assist them in the negotiations that we have going forward with the Housing Authority right now on several different levels.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could add, I don't want to undermine what you said. Just brought back some memories as far as having political champions as well. It brings me back to we had a mayor or a councilor that was running for mayor and ultimately became mayor of our city, who was pushing he was against revitalization of Lawrence Heights. A part of his campaign, he actually spoke about, shutting this down. But we did have, it was
Yeah,
real.
we had a few of those.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So we did have a counselor on the inside, and a few other people who became champions. And surely enough, with that momentum and with us, doing the Malcolm X to to City Hall and counselor's office, and with all these synergy, we're able to push through. So don't take that for granted. As far as if you do have some people in your corner, and we had staffing at Toronto Community Housing, people that were backing us as well, and go into war, not war, but go into bat for us. So if you do have those elements, that's what you want to foster, that energy, that synergy, and you want to, just keep it going.
Okay. You've answered most of my questions.
We're interested to hearing as things move forward for you guys, how things are going to unfold. Very interested.
Well, currently, as I said, Ceflo Houses did an assessment partnership community building exercise with Brownsville Partnership. And we came up with a plan that was based on the survey that we did of 562 units. And we broke it down into the several different subcategories. And maybe Ms. Pearson and the Assemblywoman can provide you with a copy of it, because I don't have a copy of it with me on my tablet. But again, we've built elements or a basic foundation for starting or being prepared for that process at our development. And hopefully some of those elements combined with some of the things that we'll learn from you guys will be put together to create a model for being able to increase resident participation, or as you guys like to call it, to reanimate and animate our people on a higher level of empowerment.
Can I ask a question of you all? Can I ask a question? Okay. I think this is, well, anybody can answer this, but to Miss Ampri Samuel, you mentioned that in New York, I guess they can just drop a development in the middle of a community that has nothing necessarily to do with the community. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, what? So how does that happen? Because I'm over in Toronto, we keep hearing, like I watch the news adamantly, I follow some Instagram accounts, some of the celebrities, they talking about how it's being, gentrified and just how expensive it is over there, and, to turn it into communities to $2 million condos and different things like that. So how does that happen without, like, in the middle of a housing community, without a process like
elected officials that don't care? Just, in like real talk, we have a mayor and an administration in City Hall that prioritizes development, but don't at all connect or partner with the community. It's at all. And you have elected officials, the way the process is here, you have elected officials that can weigh in on what happens in their district. And just in the past, we didn't have elected officials that necessarily showed up to City Hall to stop some of the stuff that we're talking about. And just as an example, when I mentioned a building just in the middle of a development, there's someone on the call now, Lisa Kenner, who lives in Van Dyke houses, and they put 2 brand new buildings that's a tower. We have towers here in the middle of the public housing development, and they moved in other families into that particular.
Wow.
And they're leasing now for one.
Yeah. So they're basically telling you, this is what we're doing, and you're not stopping it. Like, so eventually we'll create more of these and push everybody up.
Yeah. And so now we're going through a transition in the administration that would have a different vision. So this mayor is on his way out, and we'll have another mayor coming in, and better policies in place to not allow that to happen in the future. Well, it's not going to happen, but it can't happen.
The same way you guys had a champion in your that mayor that came in that did you had some champions, but a mayor came in and decided that he didn't want to go with the flow. One of the other things that people need to know is that resident leadership around the city started working to elect our own or people who are more in line with our public housing agenda of the residents. So we elected people like Richie Torres, who's now a congressman. We elected Miss Samuels. We elected a lot of different people who come from the public housing community, literally, and they began to be in places where they were formidable and more influential in making sure that the resident public housing agenda and the local public housing agenda stayed intact. And right now, that process is still in force in different levels, so that we can make sure that the political officials represent our agenda. Our assemblywoman is from public housing in Brownsville. So we have people in our political level that are actually from the public housing community, didn't forget where they came from, and are also, as Ms. Samuels and Ms. Walker have demonstrated, and also Richie Torres and others, they're also effective in making sure that the mistakes of the past don't get made again.
Okay.
And I can say that wouldn't happen.
But we're still fighting.
I'll say this, and stuff like that won't happen again because we have amazing community leaders like Shalevia Pearson that's on here laughing because social media is amazing. And will put everybody on blast, including elected officials, to make sure it doesn't happen again.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, she's definitely one of our animators.
That's on blast. So, but like all jokes aside,
Yes.
There's also an assembly, the assemblywoman, Latrice Walker, who represents the community as well. She lived in Prospect Plaza, and that was a 4-tower development that was brought to the ground. And those families were told that, we'll move you into another public housing unit, and after a few years, the buildings will be renovated, and your family will be able to move back. And that never happened. Like 15 years later, like I said, all 4 towers were demolished, and they built like shorter buildings, and it had no capacity to bring all those families back, and they were truly displaced. And our assembly member was one of them.
Yes.
Yeah, so that zero displacement piece that we spoke about, is it written, because we ensured that we had that written within the fabric of what we were doing. So I'm assuming that piece wasn't there, or if it was there, it wasn't honored. Am I correct?
It wasn't honored.
It was a part of the original plan was a zero displacement plan. And most of the time, the Housing Authority of New York, our resident leadership over the years has been, it's been like a roller coaster. There was a time when back in the 70s and the 80s, nobody messed with the public housing of New York because we were super politically organized, and we had something called the Brownsville Tenant Security and Education Program that was a subliminal political arm that registered all of the people in Brownsville to vote. We still have a large number of them. But back to the original issue, around the city now, we're beginning to again reassert our influence so that stuff doesn't happen again, and that we're trying to, especially in the documents that we're negotiating with this new transition, to make sure that zero displacement is not only a piece of paper, but it's actual a practice and policy that's in place. So we're fighting about that as we speak.
Nice, nice.
But we still, again, I look forward to working with groups like yourselves that can demonstrate to people that the housing movement is not just something that is confined by borders and fences, but the housing movement in North America has to be one where we are continuing to build community to demand housing as a right and not just something that is handed out at the pleasure of those that are in power or who are rich and can do things like that. So I'm really excited about this because I've always looked forward to collaborations with other housing experiences. I know that our city councilwoman has also brought back people from London and other places that have models for being able to solve the public housing problem, not only here in New York, but around the world. So I'm excited about this because it's a step forward in the right direction.
Yeah, and I'm super excited because the one piece that excited me about your presentation was the collaboration and contracts with the developers,
Yeah.
right? Because in our Code of Federal Regulations, which actually applies to you guys as well, it says that 30% of every contractual opportunity should go to the residents of the said areas, right, in which they want to do this development in. And so that's been a real battle here in New York in regards to getting these developers to honor that. They want to come into the area, actually build, and not give or honor what that law details, right? And once they give that, and I see that you guys have them, writing the information down in contractual ways where they are obligated to make sure that once they are developing in your neighborhoods, that they're actually giving that funding over to the grassroots organization so they can begin to train people to be property managers and in the trade skills like construction and so on and so forth, and in business and in finance and in real estate and a lot of different things that has to do with land use and land development. You understand? Because if you don't train people how to take care of the land, then I feel like we're defeating the purpose. The land is to be inherited by the future, which would be the children, right? And if we don't teach them how to build it, how to take care of it, how to maintain it, how to run the business behind it, then what is our purpose? That's my stance with it all.
And I'm
Yeah.
wondering if it
Go
might
ahead,
be
Carmen.
I'm wondering if it might be helpful that we could send to you through Lorianne some of the language that we used in our contracts, and as to what we required from the developer partner.
That would be very useful.
So we could show you, because it's a public document. It's an RFP we put out for a developer partner. Maybe I'll just
that
give
would
you
be very useful because right now New York is in the process of working with multi-developers citywide on multiple portfolio development properties, and the resident leadership have capacities to hire legal and advice and subcontractors to be able to advise them in the process. So that would be very, very useful if you could provide that stuff. And then we could have a collaborative meeting at with the leadership of our local elected representatives and Brownsville Partnership to put together a support system for them when they are going into negotiations with these developers.
Okay. So Toronto Community Housing, the mechanism, the driver that's used to is through the RFP process. We ask the developer partners to, as part of their proposal, that they make a contribution to economic development. So the partnership, the lever is done through that process. The city of
Okay.
Toronto, on the other hand, has an interesting process they use. It's slightly different. And if there's going to be a major redevelopment in an area, the city is now looking at a process that a community has what they call a community benefits framework. So there's a community benefit
we call them
community benefits
CBAs,
agreement.
community
Yes,
benefit
okay.
agreements. Yeah.
Yes, okay. So I'm happy to send you some stuff that the city has been working on recently. I know about this because I'm working on another project related to a shopping center. But I'm happy to send that to you through Lorianne as well, if you want to take a look at some of the language that the city uses.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to send Lorianne my email in the chat.
Lorianne,
I have it, and we'll make sure everyone here gets it. And actually, we'll make sure as well. We'll send around the social development plan and the link to this recording and the YouTube video.
Sounds good.
It's 7 o'clock. that was the fastest 2 hours. Amazing. Maybe and I think I'm the accidental MC just because I have my Toronto and my Brownsville histories, and so it's been a real honor for me to bring this conversation together. Mr. Bowman, to your point, this is what we hope will be an ongoing Brownsville partnership learning series, and the teed up is the Poplar Harka residents. I think it's probably going to happen on a Saturday afternoon in March, so look out for that. And
Lorianne,
yes,
bring us over there. We're trying to go over there. We're gonna come see you all, and when COVID, when the lockdown allows us to, we want to come down there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this
you need to send our president some ideas about how to deal with COVID relief, because the Canadians seem to have a lot more compassion and progressive ideas about that.
We do things differently here. We do, like, even with the governance. I noticed it. We're a little more. No, let's relax. Let's we cross our T's and dot our I's.
Not only that, you're a lot more humanitarian in your deliberations and your civil disagreements with each other.
Sometimes, actually,
that's a nice way of putting it.
And actually, Canada did pass into law housing as a human right in 2019.
Yes, I'm aware.
Yes,
and it's about time that
we just need the actions to follow.
It's about time that our brothers and sisters in the North let some of that stuff migrate our way and saturate the minds of the United States government and those that are in leadership positions.
You know it. I still vote in the U.S., so I'm doing my part.
All right.
I just thank you, Carmen, Andrea, and Vanessa, for your generosity and sharing your experience. And what I am hearing is that there is an appetite and a hunger to continue this exchange and to share documents and continue learning. And I am happy to do whatever I can to facilitate that with the amazing colleagues from Brownsville Partnership who are on this call, John Napolitano, Torian Lewis, Dale White, I'm sure Donna, who's been our slide master and guru on this, and I apologize if I missed anybody from BP. And also a real thank you to Councillor Ampry Samuel and Christina and Naomi and your whole team. And I think this is the start of something.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So I'm happy to send you, sorry, just one last thing. I will send you the materials we have about our RFP, how we selected the developer partner, the process that we followed to get tenants to help us on board with that, community benefits frameworks, any of those kind of things. I'll pass it to Lorianne, and feel free to, we'll send you our contact info if you want to reach out. Happy to connect with you as we move forward.
And that would be
Yeah.
helpful sooner than later because there are RFPs out right now, and we have some NYCHA residents organizations working with developers now to, you know, come up with plans to submit together. So that would be really helpful.
Yep, we'll do it.
Looking
We'll get
forward to
work on
working
it.
with you all.
All right, man. Take it easy.
It was really good to meet everyone. Thank you so much.
Good to see you again, Carmen.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you for
too.
having us. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
long, everybody.
Bye.
All right,
So
thank you
long,
for having
guys.
us.
Stay
Take
safe,
care.
everyone.
Good night.
Good night.